What if the reason she's not fully enjoying those intimate moments with you isn't about effort, but about how that effort shows up? What if the difference between being good in bed and being unforgettable comes down to a few subtle shifts most men never even think about? What if the problem isn't that you're missing something big, but that you're overlooking what matters most in the smallest moments? Make sure you stay until the end, because the last move is the one women respond to the most almost instantly. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time, because this is the kind of insight most men never hear, but immediately feel once they understand it. Because here's the frustrating part. You're trying. You're paying attention. You're being considerate. You're doing what you think she wants. Maybe you've even tried to improve, to learn, to be better than the last experience. You're not careless. You're not selfish. You're actually putting in effort most men don't. But something still feels slightly disconnected. She's there, but not fully there. She responds, but not deeply. There's a moment where it feels like things could go deeper, but it never quite gets there. And you notice it. That subtle drop in energy. That feeling that she's present physically, but not completely pulled into the moment. So naturally, you try to fix it. You do more. You think more. You try to get everything right. You become more aware of your actions, more focused on performance, more concerned about whether she's enjoying it. But that's where things start to shift in the wrong direction. Because the more you focus on doing everything right, the less it actually feels right. It starts to feel controlled, measured, slightly forced. And without realizing it, you move further away from what actually creates the experience she's looking for. It's not that you're doing the wrong things. You're doing them in the wrong way. Because in those moments, attraction isn't responding to effort. It's responding to how she feels. And how she feels is shaped by timing, presence, awareness, and subtle control. Not intensity, not speed, not trying harder. And once you understand that, everything changes. Because now, you're not trying to impress her. You're creating an experience she can actually fall into. So, let's shift your approach. Let's talk about the moves women quietly respond to in those moments, the ones that don't look impressive from the outside, but feel completely different on the inside. The first is pacing. Most men rush, and they don't even realize they're doing it. Not because they want to, but because they're focused on progression. They're thinking about what comes next, instead of fully settling into what's happening right now. And that creates a subtle pressure. A sense that things are always moving forward, but never deepening. But what she responds to is controlled pace. Knowing when to slow down, and actually being comfortable staying there. For example, instead of constantly transitioning from one thing to the next, you allow moments to breathe. You pause. You stay still for a second longer than expected. You let the tension build naturally before you move again. And, in that pause, something shifts. Because now she has time to feel. Psychologically, anticipation amplifies everything. When there's space, her mind engages. Her body responds more. But when everything happens too quickly, it all blends together. There's no depth, just motion. And motion alone doesn't create connection. Pacing does. The second is responsiveness. This is where most men stay disconnected without realizing it. They decide what they're going to do, and they stick to it. Almost like they're following a plan. But real connection doesn't come from a plan. It comes from awareness. For example, you start noticing the small things. Her breathing. Her reactions. The moments where she leans in or slightly pulls back. And instead of ignoring those signals, you adjust. You follow her responses instead of forcing your own rhythm. That changes everything. Because now it's not something you're doing to her. It's something you're creating with her. And psychologically, that creates a completely different experience. She feels understood without needing to say anything. She feels like you're tuned in, not just going through the motions. The third is calm confidence. Not intensity, not aggression. Calm, steady control. A lot of men think they need to bring more energy, more force, more dominance. But what actually stands out is control without tension. It's the way you move without rushing. The way you pause without hesitation. The way you stay grounded instead of overthinking. For example, instead of constantly checking yourself or trying to adjust every second, you stay composed. You trust your rhythm. You don't react nervously. You stay steady. And that steadiness does something important. It allows her to relax. Because when she feels that you're not uncertain, she doesn't feel the need to compensate. She can let go. Now, if this is making sense, make sure to like and subscribe. Because this next part is where things start to separate completely. The fourth move is variation. Doing the same thing for too long, even if it feels good, eventually loses its impact. Because the brain adapts quickly. What felt intense at the beginning becomes normal. And what becomes normal becomes less noticeable. So, what brings the feeling back? Contrast. Small, intentional changes. For example, you slightly shift your rhythm. You change your timing. You go from movement to stillness. Then back again. Not randomly, but deliberately. And those small shifts keep her engaged. Because now, her attention stays active. She doesn't drift. She stays present in what's happening. Psychologically, contrast creates awareness. And awareness keeps the experience alive. The fifth is attention to detail. This is where you separate yourself without doing anything extreme. Because most men overlook this completely. They focus on big actions instead of small adjustments. But the smallest details create the biggest difference. For example, when something clearly resonates with her, you don't rush past it. You stay there. You allow that moment to build. You notice what works and you give more of it. Instead of trying to do everything, you focus on what actually matters. And that level of attention feels different. Because now she feels seen. Not generally specifically. And psychologically, that creates a stronger emotional response than anything else. Because being understood without having to explain is rare. The sixth move is emotional presence. And this is where things go deeper. Because now it's no longer just physical. It becomes shared. It becomes something she feels with you, not just because of you. Most men are thinking too much in these moments. Trying to get it right. Trying to maintain control. Trying to reach an outcome. But presence removes all of that. For example, instead of thinking ahead, you stay in the moment. You respond to what's happening, not what you expect to happen. You stay connected to her instead of your own thoughts. And she feels that immediately, because presence is hard to fake. And when it's real, it creates intensity without effort. It makes everything feel more natural, more real, more memorable. And now, the most powerful move. The one that changes how everything is experienced. It's control without force. This is the shift most men never fully make. Because they confuse control with intensity. But real control is quiet. It's steady. It doesn't rush and it doesn't hesitate. It leads without pressure. For example, instead of waiting for signals or overthinking your next move, you act with certainty. You guide the moment naturally. You don't force it forward, but you don't hold it back either. There's a flow, a sense of direction. And that creates something deeper than attraction. It creates trust. Because when she feels that you're in control of the moment, without being overwhelming, she can fully let go. She doesn't have to think. She doesn't have to guide. She can just experience everything as it unfolds. And that's where the biggest shift happens. That's where everything becomes more intense, without needing more effort. So, how do you actually apply all of this? You stop trying to do more, and start becoming more aware. You slow down, especially when you feel the urge to rush. You pay attention to the smallest reactions. You adjust instead of forcing. You stay present instead of getting stuck in your head. And you allow the moment to build instead of trying to control the outcome. Because these aren't tricks. They're shifts in how you show up. Less pressure. More awareness. Less performance. More connection. And when you get that right, everything else follows naturally. At the end of the day, this isn't about impressing her. It's about creating something she actually feels. Something that stays with her after the moment ends. Something she can't easily explain, but doesn't forget. And when you reach that point, you don't have to question if it was good. You'll feel the difference. And so will she.